Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for a journey about 12,000 years into the past.
That's right.
We're going to southeastern Turkey, where this whole constellation of amazing archaeological sites. You've probably heard of Göbekli Tepe.
The famous one, yes.
And now it's, let's say, older and maybe even more mysterious relative, Karahan Tepe. And they are just fundamentally challenging everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization.
Everything.
You know, for the longest time, the story we all got in the textbooks was, well, it was very simple, very linear.
A neat and tidy narrative, yes.
Exactly. Humans figure out agriculture. That lets them settle down in one place. And only then, with all this new free time, do they, invent complex stuff like religion and society and monumental architecture.
And that neat narrative, as logical as it sounds, is, well, it's collapsing under the weight of these massive stone pillars.
So what's our mission today?
Our mission is to really dig into the evidence that's coming out of this huge project, the Tosta Pillar project. It covers Karahan Tepe, Göbekli Tepe, Sabers, a whole network of sites.
Okay.
And what the findings are showing, unequivocally, is that complex symbolic thought, huge social organization that didn't follow agriculture, it came before it. We're trying to figure out how these people, who history basically dismissed as simple hunter-gatherers, had it in them to pull off this kind of monumental work.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really get why these sites are such an anomaly, you have to picture the world 12,000 years ago. We're talking about 10,000 BCE, the Ice Age had just ended.
Right, the last glacial maximum is over. And it's easy to think of the Stone Age as just, harsh and cold everywhere. But this period, it was all about rapid, transformative warming.
The glaciers are retreating, sea levels are rising.
And places like southeastern Anatolia suddenly become incredibly rich. Unbelievably rich in resources.
So we're not talking about a sparse, dry landscape. The sources describe it becoming covered in forests, savannas. A perfect place for huge herds of animals like gazelle to migrate through.
Exactly. And the people living there, they fit the classic definition. They're nomadic hunter-gatherers. Crucially, they have no metal tools, no systematic farming, no domesticated animals, well, maybe the dog, and certainly no centralized state telling them what to do.
On paper, they shouldn't be capable of any kind of mass coordination.
Right. And yet, their environment wasn't some desperate struggle for survival. We see that in the diet. One of the really surprising finds at Göbekli Tepe was what they were eating.
What was it?
Fish. Lots of fish remains. And this supports a really compelling hypothesis that the whole area, the Heron Plain, wasn't dry steppe back then. It was likely a huge ancient lake or at least a massive wetland ecosystem.
Wow.
Yeah, fed by these powerful underground karst springs, the same kind of springs that, still feed the legendary sacred pools in the city of Urfa today.
So if they have this huge, stable food source from the land and the water, they don't need to invent farming to survive.
They don't. And that's the conflict. That's the big question. Why would this supposedly simple, mobile society pour so much effort, so much organization into building these giant structures that have no obvious survival function?
It forces you to see them differently.
It does. The sophistication of it all, it makes you realize their mental and social capabilities were anything but primitive. Even if their tech was just stone, they were ready for civilization. They hadn't gotten around to farming yet.
So let's zoom in on Karahan Tepe itself. Because if Göbekli Tepe was the first big shock, Karahan Tepe is the one that proves it wasn't a fluke.
It's colossal. It is a huge Neolithic settlement. We're talking 14 hectares with about 10 of those dedicated to the main ceremonial area.
And the evidence suggests they were there for a long time.
A staggering amount of time, about 1,500 years of continuous occupation. From roughly 10,000 BCE to 8,000 BCE. Think about that, a millennium and a half.
And it has that same architectural signature we see at Göbekli Tepe, right? The T-shaped pillars.
Yes, over 250 of them found so far at Karahan Tepe, often in these big circular enclosures dug down into the earth.
And for years, people debated what those pillars were meant to be. They're stylized, they don't have clear faces.
But the shape always suggested an abstract human form, maybe a guardian spirit or an ancestor. But it was just a theory.
And Karahan Tepe gave us the answer.
It really did. This is the key discovery. They recently unearthed a T-pillar that has a human face explicitly carved on it. You can see the nose, the eyes, a real expression. It confirms, without a doubt, that these pillars represent human-like figures. It's like the Rosetta Stone for this whole culture.
And that focus on the human form, it doesn't stop there. You have to tell us about the seated colossus.
Oh, this thing is just one of the most powerful pieces of art from the ancient world. It's a huge statue, 2.45 meters tall, of a seated person.
So over 8 feet tall.
Exactly. And it's thought to be an elderly individual. The anatomical detail is, well, it's stunning. You can clearly see the ribs carved out, the spine, the hair is gathered at the back. It's a masterpiece of naturalistic art, done with shocking precision.
Which brings us to the impossible task of their engineering. How on earth are you carving and moving multi-ton objects and getting this kind of fine detail with just flint and obsidian?
It just speaks to an incredible level of dedication and organization. And we don't just see it in the statues, we see it in their infrastructure. For example, their water management was advanced. They found 27 huge cisterns carved directly into the bedrock near the settlement.
Just carving into solid bedrock with stone tools, that alone is a mind-boggling amount of work.
It is. And these weren't little ponds. Some of these cisterns could hold 100 tons of water. And the whole system was connected with carved canals and little pools. For a society of hunter-gatherers, this kind of permanent, large-scale water engineering is. It's just not supposed to exist. It implies they were committed to staying in that one spot for a very, very long time.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's not just the megastructures, it's the microcraftsmanship too.
Yes, exactly. The same people moving these huge stones were also making perfect jewelry, perfect stone vessels. The sources talk about them drilling 8 flawless, tiny holes into a single small bead.
With a stone drill.
With a stone drill. It requires so much patience, so much skill. It's this dual mastery, the massive scale and the tiny, perfect detail that really defines them.
Okay, so let's shift from what they built to why they built it. Karahan Tepe seems to have a different feel. Less about general worship, maybe more about ritual and transformation.
That's the prevailing theory, yes. There's a very special chamber there, carved deep into the bedrock, that strongly suggests it was used for some kind of intense rite of passage.
What does that chamber look like?
It's highly symbolic. Inside, there's a carved male head. You can identify it by this triangular beard-like shape under the chin. And this head is facing a set of vertical stones, but the layout is the key. There's a staircase leading down into the chamber, and a totally separate staircase leading out the other side.
That kind of layout in, process out, that's classic symbolism for a sort of death and rebirth, right?
Yeah.
You go in as one person and you come out as someone new, fundamentally changed.
Precisely. Whether it was an initiation into adulthood, or for a shaman, or to choose a leader, the architecture itself implies an irreversible transformation. And to make it even more mysterious, there's a snake-shaped channel carved in the floor.
A snake channel, yep.
And it was used to pour some kind of liquid, which then flowed out into a little pool in the main central building right next to it.
So you have a very specific liquid-based ritual happening in this private space, but it's physically connected to the main gathering area. It feels less like a public temple and more like some kind of secret society or an initiatory school.
That's a great way to put it. And that level of intention, it continued right up to the end of the site's life. I mean, the way they abandoned these places was also highly ritualized.
They didn't just walk away.
No, not at all. These places weren't destroyed in a war or left to decay. They were deliberately, carefully decommissioned. They were buried, covered up with tons of soil and stone to create these artificial hills or tumuli.
Like they were putting it to sleep.
Exactly. And Karahan Tepe adds a new detail to that. Archaeologists found one area, maybe a special meeting place, that was intensely burned. But before they burned it, they left offerings on platforms. Full, perfect stone vessels and trays. It suggests this whole ritual departure with fire and gifts, followed by the final act of burial. It's an honored, purposeful end.
This is all just forcing a complete rewrite of the first chapter of human history.
Yeah.
Let's compare the two big sites, Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe, because the differences between them are really key, aren't they?
They are. Temporally, the evidence is starting to suggest Karahan Tepe might be a little bit older than Göbekli Tepe's main construction phases. We're looking at maybe 10,000 BCE for Karahan Tepe versus about 9,600 BCE for Göbekli Tepe.
400 years. I mean, that's a huge gap in this period. But the really important difference is in the symbolism.
It is. Göbekli Tepe is it's dominated by the animal world. You see fierce predators, vultures, snakes, spiders. It's an animistic worldview where humans are just one part of this wild, powerful, natural kingdom.
And Karahan Tepe.
Karahan Tepe shifts the focus. Animals are still there, absolutely. But the human figure, whether it's the stylized T-pillars or that incredible naturalistic colossus, the human is now center stage.
So what does a shift like that signal? What does it mean?
It could be signaling a moment of profound cognitive change. The Karahan Tepe culture might be where humans started to define themselves against the animal kingdom, not just as part of it. It's the moment we start separating the human world from the wild world. It could be the birth of a new kind of self-awareness on a massive societal scale.
So if it wasn't survival, what was driving them to build all this? What was the motivation?
The leading hypothesis is elite competition. Think of rival city-states in Renaissance Italy trying to one-up each other by building bigger and better cathedrals, or nations today competing in the space race.
So you're saying Karahan Tepe was in a kind of competition with Göbekli Tepe, a race for spiritual and architectural dominance.
Precisely. These rival settlements were pushing each other to build more magnificent structures, probably to attract followers, to gain status, to prove their beliefs were the most powerful. This wasn't driven by economics. It was driven by competitive belief.
Which brings us back to that new timeline. The old textbook model has to go in the bin.
It's completely reversed. The evidence now points to a new progression. First comes belief and symbolism. That requires social organization to get everyone on the same page. Then comes the architecture to house those beliefs. And only later, maybe because these huge gathering sites needed a reliable food source, only then comes agriculture.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this means that Anatolia is now basically confirmed as a global epicenter for the origin of civilization.
Oh, absolutely. The Göbekli Tepe culture isn't just a local curiosity anymore. It is the critical reference point. We now have to measure all other prehistoric settlements in the world, from the Americas to Asia, against what was happening here. It changes the entire baseline for human history.
And it's not just a cultural connection, right? There's actual genetic proof that these people and their ideas spread out from here.
The archaeogenetic research is just staggering. We now have DNA links showing that the first Neolithic farmers who spread into Europe, the people who brought agriculture to the continent, They trace their ancestry directly back to the specific region of Anatolia.
So we're talking about huge migrations of people starting from this cultural heartland.
We are. People like Ötzi the Iceman, found in the Alps, or remains from ancient tombs in Germany and caves in Spain. They all carry genetic markers that link them back to this founding population in southeastern Turkey. This Anatolian culture is essentially the source code for European farming and ancestry.
So what does this all mean?
I think the biggest, most impactful takeaway is that the sophistication needed for civilization, the abstract thought, the engineering, the social cohesion, it was already fully formed in hunter-gatherer societies 12,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Long before farming, long before metal, they had it all.
Our whole journey here shows that the reason our first great settlements were built wasn't for economic survival. It was for shared belief, for culture. And that raises a really interesting question for you to think about. If shared symbolic purpose was the driving force behind our first great civilizational leaps, what role does that kind of collective non-economic motivation, that shared vision play in the complex, organized structures of our world today?
That's a deep one.
That is a deep dive for another time. Thanks for joining us.